Here is the text exactly as you wrote it, word for word, with no changes. My mother-in-law called my 12-year-old the idiot child for 3 years. The 8-minute video I played finally ended everything. Ruth, my mother-in-law, had always treated my daughter Jenny differently from her biological grandkids. Jenny was 12 when I married her son Colin, and from the beginning Ruth made it obvious Jenny wasn't real family. She would buy pricey gifts for Colin's sister's children and hand Jenny cheap dollar store items. Whenever Jenny thanked her politely, Ruth would respond, "Well, you should be grateful for anything. You're lucky Colin lets you live in his house." It wasn't Colin's house. It was mine before we even met. But Ruth kept telling everyone Colin had saved me and my so-called baggage from poverty. The idiot incident happened at Ruth's 70th birthday gathering. Jenny had spent weeks creating a scrapbook filled with family photos and handwritten notes about special memories. When she handed it to Ruth, Ruth flipped through it in front of everyone and said, "This is what you got me? Some old pictures glued to paper?" Then she raised the gift from her other grandchild, a store-bought jewelry box, and announced, "Now this is a real present from a real grandchild with a working brain." Jenny tried to explain she made her gift because she thought it would be meaningful. Ruth laughed and said, "Only an idiot thinks trash is more valuable than something you actually buy. But I guess that's what happens when you come from broken homes. The stupidity just continues." She used the word idiot 3 more times that night while pointing it at Jenny. The idiot child forgot to push in her chair. Someone should teach the idiot some manners. Maybe the idiot should eat with the little kids where she belongs. Colin sat there silently. Later he told me his mother didn't mean anything by it, claiming she came from a different generation and wasn't used to stepkids. "Give her time," he said. It had already been 3 years. Ruth's behavior only escalated. She would forget to set a place for Jenny at family meals. She planned outings for the grandkids during Jenny's school events so she couldn't join. She even opened a college fund for her biological grandchildren and made sure Jenny knew she wasn't included. "College would be wasted on someone with your limited ability," she told Jenny. "Trade school might be more your level, or just marry rich like your mother." She said all of this at Thanksgiving with 20 people listening. Colin claimed I was overreacting. Then something unexpected happened. Colin's ex-wife, Lindsay, contacted me. She'd heard through mutual friends how Ruth was treating Jenny and said Ruth had done the same thing to her nephew when she and Colin were fostering him. Lindsay said Ruth called him stupid, worthless, and not real family. Colin never defended him. "That's why I left," she said. Lindsay still had everything documented, emails where Ruth admitted to pushing the foster child out because he wasn't blood, recordings of Ruth screaming that Lindsay was infertile trash, and should be grateful Colin hadn't left her for a woman who could give him real children. She even had a letter Ruth wrote to Colin claiming Lindsay's nephew was probably brain damaged and they should return him before he affected their future biological children. Lindsay handed it all to me. But I wasn't finished. I started contacting other people in Ruth's life. Her younger sister, Janet, admitted Ruth had tormented her all through childhood, calling her the idiot sister and telling everyone Janet was adopted because their parents were embarrassed by her. She wasn't adopted. Ruth's former best friend, Amy, told me Ruth ended their 40-year friendship when Amy's daughter married a man with kids from a previous relationship. Ruth called the stepchildren parasites and accused Amy of supporting the destruction of traditional families. I gathered everything, emails, recordings, statements, and created a full presentation. Then I waited for the right moment. It arrived at the Christmas party. Ruth was acting like the perfect grandmother, telling Colin's boss how thankful she was for her beautiful family. That's when I asked if I could share a holiday video. I connected my phone to the venue's AV system and played Ruth's greatest hits. Her voice filled the room, calling Jenny an idiot, calling stepkids parasites, bragging about breaking children, and praising herself for teaching Colin to tell the difference between real family and fake trash. The compilation ran for 8 minutes. The room was silent except for Ruth's own voice explaining how she protected her biological grandchildren from contamination by stepchildren she considered worthless. Colin's boss looked stunned. Colin tried insisting the audio was edited, but then Lindsay walked in. She held a thick folder and went straight to the screen, still paused on Ruth's face. Colin tried talking about doctored audio, but Lindsay cut him off. She held up her phone and said she had the original files with full metadata, dates, times, device info, proving everything was real. She said she was prepared to testify about the pattern of abuse she witnessed when she and Colin were fostering her nephew. Ruth's face went from red to white instantly. She opened her mouth several times but couldn't form a sentence. Then I played a second clip, one Ruth didn't know I had. It was from 3 weeks earlier, recorded by the home's hallway camera. Jenny had walked into the house carrying a binder of homework. Ruth was in the kitchen with Colin's sister. As soon as Jenny passed by, Ruth whispered, "There goes the idiot again," loud enough for the microphone to catch. She laughed and added, "I swear, Colin only married her mother because he felt bad for her. Who else would take on someone else's kid?" When Jenny came back into frame to grab a glass of water, Ruth turned toward her and muttered, "Watch her spill it. Idiots always do." The moment that clip ended, murmurs began. A few guests stood up. Colin froze. His sister buried her face in her hands. Ruth tried to defend herself. "This is harassment. You dug up old misunderstandings to make me look bad." But then Lindsay calmly pulled out a printed timeline showing Ruth had used the same slur toward 3 other children in the past 20 years, all of them stepkids or foster kids. Every instance had been documented. Ruth's brother-in-law stepped forward next. He apologized to the room and admitted Ruth had been pushed out of multiple family events because she tormented any child she didn't consider legitimate. He said they were tired of hiding it, but felt it wasn't their place to interfere with Colin's marriage. By then, the room wasn't just shocked, they were disgusted. Jenny was watching everything with tears running down her cheeks. I put my arm around her and finally said out loud what Ruth had denied for years, that she had bullied children for decades, that she targeted anyone she decided didn't belong, and that none of it had ever been about Jenny's worth. Ruth wasn't protecting a family. She was protecting her fantasy of what family should look like, one where she controlled who mattered. Jenny wasn't the problem. Ruth was. I told the room that families don't have to share blood to be real, that kindness creates family, not DNA, and that Ruth had spent her entire life confusing cruelty for tradition. Ruth screamed that we were ruining her birthday. People actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because her priorities were so warped. Colin quietly told her to step outside. Instead, she shouted, "I won't leave my own party," so half the guests left instead. Colin followed me to the parking lot. He insisted I had blindsided him, that I could have handled it privately. I asked him how many more times his mother would have needed to call our daughter an idiot before he stepped in. He didn't answer. That night, after we got home, Jenny went straight to bed. She was exhausted from crying. I sat at the foot of her bed and promised her that the days of shrinking herself to survive someone else's bitterness were over. If you have more text you want me to read verbatim, just send it. Here is the text exactly as you wrote it, word for word, with no additions, no edits, no omissions. Colin slept in the guest room. The next morning, Ruth sent a long message claiming I had fabricated a smear campaign because I was jealous of her relationship with her real grandchildren. She said Jenny would grow out of her stupidity if I stopped coddling her. She demanded a public apology. I didn't respond, but dozens of other people did. Guests from the party, former friends, extended relatives. Some sent screenshots of past texts where Ruth had insulted other children. Others apologized for staying silent. The truth spread faster than Ruth could control it. By the end of the week, Colin admitted he had looked the other way because standing up to his mother felt impossible. He said he didn't realize how bad it was. I told him he didn't want to realize it because that would have forced him to act. And now, acting was the only thing left. Within days, everything began to unravel for Ruth. Her church group found out about the recordings and quietly removed her from 2 committees. Parents she had bragged to for years stopped inviting her to gatherings. Even her favorite neighbor, the one she always used as an audience for her woe is me stories, texted me to apologize for never realizing how cruel she truly was. But Ruth wasn't interested in reflection. She doubled down. She sent Colin a long voice note insisting that I had manipulated him, that Jenny was corrupting the family image, and that he needed to reclaim control before I poisoned everyone against her. She added that if he stayed with someone burdened with another man's child, he'd regret it forever. Colin played it for me. His hands were shaking. That was the moment he finally broke. He told Ruth he needed space. She accused him of being brainwashed. He hung up. For the first time in years, the house felt quiet, not tense, not bracing for the next subtle jab or forced apology. Quiet in a good way. 2 days later, Ruth showed up at our door uninvited. She banged on the door so hard the frame rattled. I didn't open it. Colin did. She launched into a rant about how her reputation was ruined because someone, meaning me, had weaponized old moments. She insisted the slurs were jokes, that everyone knew was too sensitive, and that I needed to delete everything. Then she demanded that Jenny apologize to her for embarrassing her in front of important people. Colin told her, very calmly, that she wasn't welcome around our daughter until she could admit what she did and get help. Ruth gasped like he'd physically struck her and shouted that he was choosing strangers over his own blood. He replied, "Jenny isn't a stranger. She's my daughter." She left shrieking, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt the smallest flicker of hope. Over the next week, Colin started therapy, something he'd avoided his whole adult life because, in his words, speaking about his childhood made him feel disloyal. He admitted that Ruth had taught him to normalize verbal cruelty, to see it as discipline or tradition. He said he finally understood that silence wasn't keeping peace, it was enabling harm. Meanwhile, Jenny began to relax in ways I hadn't seen before. She talked more at dinner. She stopped apologizing before speaking. She even asked if she could invite a friend over, something she hadn't dared to do since Ruth started picking at her confidence. Then, unexpectedly, Ruth sent a letter. Not an apology, just a dramatic, handwritten essay about how everyone misunderstood her and how she had only ever wanted what was best for the family. She insisted that acknowledging wrongdoing would destroy her integrity. She asked to see Colin alone so he could come to his senses. He didn't respond. After a month of no contact, we had our first peaceful holiday season. No backhanded gifts, no pointed comments, no pretending everything was fine. Just us. We baked cookies, watched movies, and let Jenny decorate the tree however she wanted, something Ruth used to criticize every year. And somewhere in that quiet month, something shifted. Colin told me he finally understood what I've been fighting for. Not drama, not revenge, just safety, just decency. Just a life where our child didn't cry herself to sleep because a grandmother needed to feel superior. As for Ruth, cutting her out didn't destroy the family. It saved it. Jenny began thriving at school again. Her teachers noticed she was more confident. She joined an art club and actually came home excited to show us what she made. And one night, while tucking her in, she whispered, "Thank you for protecting me." I realized then that exposing Ruth wasn't about payback. It was about making sure my daughter didn't grow up thinking cruelty was normal. Families aren't defined by blood. They're defined by the people who choose to show up with kindness and the courage to remove those who don't. If you have more to transcribe word for word, just send it.